Hi, and welcome to today's episode of pianoTV. So about a couple weeks ago, they had a music festival here in town, and a lot of my students participated in it. And I was there basically every day of the week, and I decided to take copious amounts of notes and just kind of absorb all of the information that the adjudicator was giving these kids in order to find some commonalities and just bits of information that I could then pass on to you and share things that I thought were interesting. I love music festival because even if you do so good, you blow everyone away, the adjudicator is still going to find something for you to work on. Like for example, there was this kid who, the highest mark I saw was a 90 all festival long, and he played brilliantly, and even he got suggestions. So it's just, it kind of shows the kids that playing music is an eternal learning process, which is valuable to know as an adult as well. Anyway, let's get started. There are four main topics that we're going to cover in today's video. The first one is things related to the wrist and arm posture. Is probably one of the most talked about things on the festival week. And then we're going to kind of derail a little bit into staccatos. It's a short little category, but worth mentioning. Number 3 is interpretation and how a piece is expressed. And then fourth is entertainment. So what we're going to do in each of these categories is talk about some important takeaways that I had from the week and kind of discuss finer points within each category. So pull up a chair if you're not sitting, or just keep doing what you're doing. And anyway, let's get started. So most of you already know that the tune of the piece, the melody, is the part that needs to come out louder and more clearly than the harmony. So a lot of the times that ends up being the left hand is the harmony, the left hand needs to be more subdued, and then the right hand is the melody, which needs to project a little bit above it. But there are some actual physical gestures that you can do unconsciously that sabotage your ability to achieve this hand balance. And there are also some kind of body movements we can do that wreck our ability to play quickly. So let's go to the piano and talk about those. If the arm bounces, the sound projects a lot louder. And sometimes that's the effect we want, but if we're playing a really, nice melody on the right hand, and then the left hand's bouncing, then the left hand is gonna dominate the right. It's gonna overpower it. So the best thing we can do there is to keep our arm steady and play with our fingers more. So there's with a bounce, and here's steady. It's tough because it requires more finger control, but it's essential because it creates more sound control. So the other thing that the bouncy arm does is that it actually can slow down your playing. So if you're doing a fast kind of passage like that, and you're kind of bouncing your arm, it's really, it looks so awkward when you kind of pinpoint it, trying to play like this, but it happens a lot, and I saw that more than once in festival. Yeah, where your arm is just kind of working against you. So when we want to play fast, we mainly play fast from the fingers. It's all in finger control, and if your arm's kind of moving, it's just going to impede you. So the next thing we're going to talk about is wrist position, because how your wrist moves when you play is really important to having a good performance. It's super common for people to play with droopy wrists, kind of like this. And I think maybe we're wimpy or lazy, and we kind of lack the strength in the wrist to raise them up a little bit. But the problem with droopy wrists is they cause you to play with flat fingers. You see how especially my pinky, they all kind of flatten out. Whereas when we raise the wrist, we can play on our fingertips. And if if our wrist is low and our hand's flat, it's also really, really, really hard to play fast. It creates a lot of tension in there. So the adjudicator actually, she actually gave the kids this exercise where you hold out your hand, and then you put your other hand in your hand. Hopefully you can see this. And then you put your wrist down, and you try to play you try to move your fingers fast, like you're playing a scale. And you can really feel tension in there, and it's kind of awkward and spidery. And then she gets them to raise the wrist, not the elbow, the wrist, and do the same thing. And suddenly it's your fingers are free. They can move as fast as you want. So then we have the thumb drops. So some people play with perfect wrist posture until their thumb hits a note, and then it's the thumb presses and the whole wrist falls down. And once you go back to the other fingers, the wrist raises back up again. Some people have problems using their thumbs in piano. And some of us don't. I find it kind of interesting. I don't know why that is. I think it maybe just comes down to basic strength. But I want you to patrol your piano playing, because a lot of people did this, just to make sure you're not experiencing the drop. And playing that way is also going to slow you down. Like the more time your wrist spends kind of dancing around, the less you're going to be able to play quickly. And it also, I don't know if you've probably heard this from these little examples, but it creates like an undesirable thunk. Like it kind of ends up creating an accent in a place where you don't always want an accent. So try to keep your thumb level as best you can. And for you, this might be really easy, but it also might be really hard. It kind of just depends on your physiology. The next category is a quick but important point, and it's on staccatos. So the adjudicator was really picky about articulations and staccatos in particular. We're not going to go into crazy depth here, but I just want to share some insight she had on how to make your staccatos come through more clearly, more quickly, so they don't sound so heavy, so they sound light like they're meant to sound. So she made a really good analogy with two different types of staccatos, and you tell me which one sounds more desirable. So you can have sticky peanut butter finger staccatos or crisp popcorn staccatos. I mean, peanut butter's delicious, but like, as a finger analogy for how you play, probably not the ideal one. We want our staccatos bright and crisp. If they're kind of slow and lengthy like that, and sticky peanut butter fingers, it makes your playing almost sound lazy. And a lot of the times the solution to this is to simply play on the tips of your fingers. So, and this has to do with wrist position too. So if your wrist is a little raised or like level, it's easier to play on your fingertips. Because if your fingers are a little flat and you're playing on the finger pads, it's really tough. I'm really struggling to create that like staccato sound, whereas when it's rounded, it's much, much easier to play nice staccatos that don't sound really thick. Since we were in the church, Since we were in a church, the adjudicator had the kids put their fingers on the back of a bench. And then she had them try that out on the bench and just kind of listen to the clicking sound. So she had them play staccatos with flat fingers and listen to the clicking sound, and then she had them do it rounded and listen to the clicking sound. And it sounds a lot more like pop, pop, pop when you play with rounded fingertips instead of finger pads. So whether you're a kid or an adult, it's useful tidbit there. The third point is interpretation. So of all the points we're talking about today, posture and wrist stuff is obviously a really big deal, but this was possibly the most frequently mentioned of the topics, that of interpretation. So this includes things like creating mood in the piece, creating a sound picture, we'll talk more about that, and telling a story with your piece, and also being able to play expressive and clear melodies. So let's talk about melodic shaping. We have a tendency to just kind of ignore slurs when we see them on the page. Like we kind of get it in a general sense that it means to play smooth, but there is more to a slur than that a lot of the time, especially when we're talking about the melody. So the adjudicator was always quick to point out that one of the most natural ways to play a phrase, let's look at this one just because it all fits on one line. So the most natural way to play a phrase is to rise, and you can kind of see the notes rise too, and then fall. And also you can kind of see the notes fall too. So how do you do that on the piano? Well, we can do that by creating a subtle crescendo and diminuendo. It's kind of like we're swelling up to the midpoint with just a gentle crescendo, and then we let the sound fall back down with a similarly gentle diminuendo. And what this does is it gives music a natural, lifelike, almost a breathing quality. Over and over, I saw her point out to the kids how important it is to have phrases that rise and fall, like a crescendo and diminuendo. Not to like that dramatic degree, but subtly, like enough to make it kind of sound lifelike and breathing. Sorry, let me do that again. Everything I'm doing today is a C5 finger scale. It's just like a really good standard. Easy to demonstrate. Easy to play too if you're trying this at home. It just kind of has like it's almost like a wave-like sound to it. I did a G 5-finger scale. I'm switching it up. I love how frequently the adjudicator talked about painting a sound picture during festival week. Like, a lot of the times we learn pieces with these interesting, expressive titles like The Stormy Sea or Mist, or like some of the ones I got on the screen here, and so on. So what she did is she asked the students how to paint that sound picture in the audience's mind. So how do we do that? How do we create a sound picture? What are the paints on our palettes, to go with the metaphor? So our tools or paints would be things like staccatos, tempo, phrasing, etc., etc. And these are how we impact the overall mood and tone of a piece. So it's really important to consider all of these details when you're playing beyond simply learning to play the notes. So learning the notes of a piece is like a good first step, but there's so much more to music beyond that. And finally, the fourth point is entertaining. So she asked the question to a group of kids, what is the point of performing? A piano piece, anything, performing anything. And none of the kids really, they're just kind of hemming and hawing a little bit. And so she told them the point of performing is to entertain the audience. We as performers are entertainers. Now, entertaining, I don't just mean like the ability to get people to stand up and start dancing or anything like that. Entertaining can be like, someone can be entertained by a heart-breaking rendition of a very sad piece, right? Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be like a happy thing. Entertainment is really just more about creating an emotional connection between you and the audience. You draw them in and they can get enjoyment out of it. So anyway, as a performer, it's your job to entertain. So how do you do that? So the first thing is to take risks. All too often what happens to us as performers is we spend all this time working on the details, but then as soon as we go and show it to someone or perform for someone or a group of people, all the details just kind of disappear. We get on stage, we get nervous, and we just like kind of clam up. I see this every year with my students. They can play beautifully in the classroom, they can play beautifully at home, very expressive, lots of dynamics, and then they get up on stage and there's like not a drop of dynamic contrast. It's all very flat. Or if the student has a really lively, upbeat piece, they're playing loudly in the studio, they've got all the zest and energy they need, but then they get on stage and play kind of nervously. They hold back, they don't go above like a medium volume. So as the adjudicator said, live a little, live on the edge. It is a huge risk, it's a huge emotional risk. It's not even a risk, it's a perceived risk to get up and play an emotional piece for someone and open up your heart in that way. It is taking a risk, it is a little bit of a stretch outside of our comfort zone, but it's an important one if we want to be able to play effectively. So another thing with posture that she talked about is when you're finished a piece, is it a good idea to just kind of like, and then your hands kind of like flop in your lap and you walk away? I mean, no, that like obviously I was kind of setting that up to be a bad idea. So when you're playing, say you're playing something like really beautiful, like lots of flowing sounds and phrases, how are you going to be moving your hands? You want to move your hands in a rounded way. So let's go back to the first example. I'm getting like sidetracked here. So if a performer finishes like, they finish with like a loud fortissimo, and their hands kind of, instead of just, you do see the difference. It just adds to the entertainment value. It adds to that, like, to that confidence. And if you're doing like an expressive, beautiful piece and you're kind of finishing it like, kind of like a nice little elegant wrist instead of again. See, do you see the difference? How you move she kind of called it the beautiful dancing wrists. So how you move your hands when you play can kind of impact the entertainment value that the audience can perceive. We have so little else to do as piano players. We can't like dance while we play or anything because there's so much focus. So I mean, little gestures and pretty movements and stuff make a huge difference in the audience's eyes. And I think it impacts the way we play too. So as piano players, we basically like sit down and then we face forward the whole time we play. Like, it's not like with singers where you can kind of like get up and dance and make eye contact with people. That's why I'm not on stage singing, because that's how I'd be dancing. Oh boy. Anyway, so I want to talk to you about commanding the stage with posture. And I was super proud about my students this year because the adjudicator commented to most of my students that they did a great job sitting down on the bench, which seems like nothing, but they took the time to fix the bench, to make sure the bench was kind of in the right spot for them. We talked about this, we rehearsed this. They sat on the edge of the bench, which gives them like nice flat feet on the floor. They took a moment to get their foot on the pedal if that's what they needed to do. They kind of waited, did like maybe a breath or two, and then they played. So something so small like this makes such a big difference because it kind of shows the audience that you're confident and that like, you know, you're not just like running up to the stage and like sitting down the bench and like racing through your piece and then running away. Like, oh my goodness, get me out of here. You're kind of showing like that you're comfortable with this situation. You're okay moving a bench around in front of people because you're confident, you're not concerned, you're not freaked out. Even if your heart's beating a little faster, it gives the illusion of that confidence. It also allows you to play better because when you get set up in the right spot and make sure you're kind of grounded before you start playing, you're going to have a more centered performance. And that is all for today's episode on just adjudicating music festival, the things that I learned that I thought might, you know, help you out. And I know most of you are not kids. There's probably a few kids out there. But even as an adult, these are still things that we can kind of think about when we're playing. So hopefully you got something out of that. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, give it a like. You can subscribe. Also, if you wish, totally your call, but I appreciate it. And if you want to hang out and, you know, interact with me in other ways, you can check out my social media, and you can also go over to Patreon where you can, you know, where we can like have little extras and bonuses and goodies and stuff. And thanks for everyone who helps make these videos possible. I'm going to breathe now, and goodbye. Oh no, the heater's running. Gotta turn it off. Beep. 5, 4. It counts down. Oh, it is recording.